but the argument, his argument is that these quote unquote terrorists and Hamas is, I don't, unless I'm completely crazy, Hamas does seem like a terrorist organization to me. And
I think it's not the point. But
anyway, his argument is that they're supported by foreign powers, and therefore the United States should help them remove the foreign powers, which is why he's been
right. And my point is the whole premise of Netanyahu, which is that Israel will keep all this land, is the underlying reason for all of this, and it's a completely illegitimate reason.
And I mean, this notion that you then argue that that what is obviously the only long-term solution, what's obviously the only long-term solution to this region is to have two states.
That's correct.
Unless you kill half the population.
That's it.
One side or the other kills the other 7 million. And even then, it's probably not sustainable.
That's correct. This is the whole point. It's not even complicated. That's where we started the conversation.
Yeah.
This is not complicated. There is one viable endpoint, and that is two states. And one side right now, Israel, completely rejects that. And the other side, which is the Arab countries and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the BRICS and the G20 and the UN General Assembly, all support the two-state solution. So I live in the world of diplomacy. I've spoken with foreign ministers across the Middle East in the last 4 weeks, top foreign ministers. I have spoken with very, very senior officials all over the world. There is an overwhelming will for two states, and within that, Lawrence, for demilitarization, for ending the belligerencies, for stopping armaments of Hamas. Then groups like Hamas are what they are, which is completely dependent organizations on states, just like Netanyahu says. He just comes to a different conclusion. We agree. Hamas is nothing but for the states that support it. So he and I agree. He just has a different view. His view is one state, Israel, that's it. And my state is, that's obnoxious, that can never lead to peace. And Mr. Netanyahu, stop getting my country, the United States, into your wars. That's my point.
Okay, but one would have to say, I know we've had this discussion before. You've worked with the United Nations, and you hold it in higher regard than I do, frankly.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if it's true that UN operatives were a part of the October 7th.
No.
I mean, at least UN health.
No.
You think that's propaganda? You're sure it's propaganda? It's
worse than propaganda.
Uh-huh.
It goes by the initials of BS.
Yeah. Okay. So, but aside from that, if you look at, of course, my history. I'm being Jewish, of looking back at wars. The question is, can you? And you're always going to say you have to trust. I guess at some level.
No. I'm not going to say that.
Look, you look at the many times over the history where there have been preemptive attempts to destroy Israel, and it looked to me like they were preemptive attacks. The various wars that Israel ended up expanding their territory because of. How would you react to claims by people now that things are different? Again, I'm trying to be a devil's advocate.
No, of course. There's a long story which we should take up at some point, but
not now.
Israel or the Jewish people have had control over supposedly their ancient homeland for a few hundred years of the last 3,000 years.
Uh-huh.
It raises a question why. Okay, I'll give you an example. In 66 AD, Jewish extremists launched a rebellion against Rome. Okay, I put this in the category, are you kidding? Are you kidding? Well, they said, this is, I don't know, God told us to do this, or we need to do this. And my attitude is, I can't express how I would really say it on polite company, but It is basically, are you kidding? You're going to have a rebellion against the Roman Empire? Well, they did. And in 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. And one of the, high points of Jewish, or I shouldn't be flippant about it, but one of the most famous moments of Jewish history is a mass suicide on the fortress of Masada. Okay, to my mind, if mass suicide is your kind of emblem, national emblem, something's a little wrong with the thinking. And then, by the way, 50 years later, they did it again. So the temple was destroyed, and then there was another rebellion that started in 132, and that was the end of Jewish presence in Jerusalem for the next basically 1,800 years, with the very tiny exceptions, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. I would like these zealots to learn a little history, which is they keep saying, and it's been said to me, God will provide, God will provide. The truth is, for the last 2,000 years, zealotry got them expelled from the homeland for the vast majority of time. A little prudence wouldn't hurt. A little bit of idea that the 7 million Palestinians should have their own place to live next door. It's been their territory too. And you could live in peace. And if you don't think so, I will take them one by one to talk to people that ardently want this kind of peace.
Okay, and that you think can enforce this kind of peace?
Absolutely. Because, by the way, most people, and I'm talking about most governments too, are not driven by zealots. They're driven by practical people that are trying to figure out how to get along the next day, how to make sure there's enough food, water, healthcare, schools for the children, and so on.
Wow, it's amazing. It's really wonderful to think, if that's really true, that most governments are run by zealots.
And when you look at wars, they generally have reasons. And the wars in Ukraine, I expressed my view about the reason, which is the United States can't leave good enough alone. And when I look at the wars in the Middle East, it's because of a failure to have a fair settlement of two peoples. Practical, pragmatic.
Okay, last issue of this is, well, they come together. Two terms that are used a lot one is genocide, and you've used it.
Yes.
And I guess I see genocide, and I think, I guess you're really believing this is true, but, as an intentional, not accidents of war or inevitable casualties of war or response to an attack, but a desire to eliminate a population. And you really believe you really view, I don't want to use the word believe, but you view the evidence is really that.
Well, let me explain. Genocide is a legal term. It's a legal term that was invented at the end of World War II, basically, and because of the Holocaust. In 1948, a global convention, the 1948 Genocide Convention, was adopted by the world's governments. Everyone can go online, type in 1948 Genocide Convention, and find out exactly the legal claim. And so it's a set of precise terms. Israel is now charged with genocide in the International Court of Justice by a complaint that was brought by the government of South Africa. And there's been a lot of pleadings, briefs, and then on both sides, evidence, further statements and briefs by other countries, other governments, and so on. I've read the totality of this, and when I say it's a genocide, what I mean is that it's in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. Now, this is before the International Court of Justice. They haven't made a final ruling. They made a preliminary ruling that said, yeah, it really could be. I read the complaints, and I believe that this is correct. if the ICJ rules soon that, well, this isn't a genocide, this is a horrible war, it's tragic and so forth, I'll no doubt accept that if because there will be a long opinion and it will explain juridically. I expect the International Court of Justice to rule that this is a genocide in the specific sense that it is in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. So that's the way I'm using the term.
Okay, and you and then the other term that one hears bandied about, which I have no sympathy for, which is settler colonialism. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone's, as we pointed out, populations have moved in and out. Palestine certainly didn't exist as a place, and many people who are now in Palestine, I'm sure, moved there from or had to leave other Arab countries to move in, and as did many Jews, although there were Jews there then. What's your view on this settler colonialism claim, and is it nonsense?
No, it's not nonsense. The history of what we now call Israel and Palestine, so Israel plus East Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, is that this was a region of the Ottoman Empire. And in 1915, 1916, 1917, in the midst of World War I, the British promised this land to 3 different parties. Now, Britain was not in control of any of it. This was Ottoman territory, and the Ottomans were on the side of the German and Austro-Hungarian Empire in World War I against the British, the French, and the Russians. And so Britain was promising this territory first to the Arabs, to one group of Arab leaders said, fight with us, we give you this land. They promised it to the French in the so-called Sykes-Picot, and they promised it to the Jews as a Jewish homeland in 1917 in the Balfour Declaration. I regard in general the British as about the most cynical leaders in the world, because they were the world's dominant empire and they behaved like the Americans behave today. They behaved with impunity. They were fighting a war. They were using their sway and so forth, but they ended up making a colossal mess that's been with us for 100 years. In 1921, what we call Palestine, well, what we call Israel and Palestine, basically the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, became British. Britain gained a mandate in the new League of Nations. That's what this territory is. When Britain gained that mandate, the Jewish population at that time was a little under 10% of the population, and the non-Jewish population, which was roughly 3/4 Muslim and 1/4 Christian, was the rest of the population. There's a lot of interesting anthropology and sociology of where those people were, but many of them had lived there for centuries. This is plain. This was an agricultural region and people lived there, and also somewhat of a commercial region, at least on a small scale, as part of the Ottoman Empire for many, many centuries. But under the British mandate and the Balfour Declaration, Britain said, okay, we're going to enable this to be a Jewish homeland. And because of the persecution of Jews and the poverty of Jews in Eastern Europe and after the Bolshevik Revolution in what became the Soviet Union and so forth, there was an in-migration of Jews into this new so-called mandatory territory. From the first day, the Arabs said, what the hell is this? You're just upsetting the demographic balance. So it was an anti-immigrant sentiment. It was, of course, a settler colonial enterprise in a literal sense. These were settlers coming in under a colonial mantle. And that's where the term originates. So in a literal historical sense, this is precisely what it is. Now, those that were coming in said many things. Some said, this is our ancestral home, this is our right. Others said, we're not going to make noise, we're just coming in, we just want a place to live, we won't bother, and so forth. But over time, the Jewish population continued to expand. The Arab resistance to it continued to grow. And suddenly, by the 1930s, there were two significant peoples, and there was increasing inter-community feuding and violence. And then came, what do we do about this? And the British established a commission in 1936 called the Peel Commission, which said, oh, maybe there needs to be two separate states, a kind of partition. And in 1947, the UN, very much influenced by the pro-Zionist side, said, two states, but we get the best part, said the Jews. They get 56% of the land for 33% of the population. The Arabs said, no, we don't accept that. We don't like this drawing of the map. Israel declared independence on that basis. The Arab states attacked. They were defeated. Israel became a sovereign state, and there was no state of Palestine. Gaza was part of, under Egyptian rule. East Jerusalem and the West Bank was under Jordanian rule. And the partition plan was in abeyance. Well, okay, that's the basic history.
Yeah.
It's not been solved to this day. And I think the Peel Commission or the 1947 partition, though it wasn't very fair, it's the basis still that the whole world says, yeah, there need to be two states. Now, by the way, Palestine, the Palestinians would end up, I think it's with 22% of the land. It's something much, much smaller in what they're claiming now.
Than what they could have had back then.
Yeah, and the Israelis are saying, no way, it's all of ours. And so this is the craziness of it.
It's crazy. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Right now, they're settled for something much less they would have gotten in the original partition. But I guess the point I'm making is that this is an excellent history, an excellent summary of the history. Yeah. But it's history, and it's nice to know the history. But it's 100 years ago, 1921, and you can't remake the world in 2024 like it was.
And what I'm suggesting is we go with international law.
Yeah.
We go with the decision recently of the International Court of Justice. We go with the 50 years of resolutions of the UN Security Council. And what that says is two states on the border of the 4th of June, 1967. Each of the two states has Jerusalem as its capital, one in West Jerusalem, one in East Jerusalem, and we get on with life. And now what's interesting for me about that, you could say it's not fair. The Palestinians are half the population, but they only end up with 22% of the land or something like that. But the truth is, it is the right focal point for ending this conflict because that solution, which I just outlined, is supported by about 180 countries in the world. And even the United States says so. But then when it comes to a vote, the U.S. always sides with Israel so far. And so I say we're one vote away from the two-state solution. The U.S. just has to reverse its veto.
Yeah, great. That I think more important than 180 countries, as far as I can tell is that the countries bordering Israel all support that.
In 2002, the Arab League put forward a peace initiative. it's one of the great hidden secrets, because in the Western media, you don't hear what the Arabs do, you hear what the Israelis say.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, in 2002 and then in every year since then, what's called the Arab Peace Initiative has been reiterated. Maybe something has to be negotiated along some margin, but it's basically two states exactly the way that I just said. I've spoken with Arab leaders in the last few weeks. They're absolutely in favor of this, one after the other. And, Israel might, don't believe them. But I would say to Israel, you're phony. Sit down and talk. Then tell me why not to believe them or to believe them.
Yes, let's talk.
Don't just preempt this. And I'm so tired of Israel saying this, frankly. I just want the rest of the UN to vote for it, period. Then they can talk with each other, but let there be a state of Palestine without Israel having a veto over it. And then we'll get on to peace.
Great. And maybe that answers the last question before I ask you about Trump for a minute.
Oh, yeah, but we really have to go.
I know we have to go. 5 minutes. At most.
Okay.
What next in Israel? What do you think is likely? I know what you want to happen. What's going to happen? Well, and I guess we can't dissociate it from Trump. So maybe let me put it out. What do you what would you like to happen for Trump's second Nobel Prize?
Yeah,
and what do you think is going to happen?
I would like Trump to say, okay, I support a Palestinian state, and it's going to be on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, and Hezbollah and Hamas have to drop every armament and no nonsense. There's not going to be any of this shelling bullshit. We're going to
What about returning the hostages as a prerequisite?
Well, of course. I mean, that goes without saying. Every dimension of belligerency ends now. You get what you want. This side gets what it wants. Both sides live in peace. You stop bickering. If you want to talk to each other, fine. If you don't want to talk to each other, don't talk to each other. And I'm going to go collect my second Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, that's what you'd like to have happen.
Exactly.
What do you think is going to happen? Because I think that's as likely as a snowball in hell. But anyway.
I hope that we don't continue with all sorts of illusions. The illusion of Trump and Biden, Trump won and Biden was, Palestine, no one cares about Palestine. We're going to make normalization of Israel with its neighbors anyway, no Palestinian state. We're going to give F-35s to Saudi Arabia. Maybe we'll sweeten it with a defense pact. This has been the absolute aim of both administrations, and Saudi Arabia was the big prize for it. And we had a negotiator that I would not say was exactly an unbiased mediator. His name is Amos Hochstein, and he was in charge of getting Saudi Arabia to sign on. And the Saudis have been extremely clear, especially in recent weeks. There can be no normalization. There will be no normal relations with Israel. There will be no peace in the region until there is a state of Palestine. So I'm hoping that President Trump comes into his second term understanding that the situation is quite different from what it was when he left on January 20th, 2021.
Well, that would require some knowledge on his part. And that's something I hope, but I'm not optimistic that there's been any knowledge of anything that's been going on his part. But we'll see. In that regard, Trump 2, we're going to survive?
Well,
you won a third Nobel Prize after all.
I mean, the third Nobel Prize is, we say, Taiwan, that's an internal Chinese problem. And that will avert a war with China.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful thing to do.
Yes,
but again, I can't see it.
That's Nobel Prize number 3.
Yeah, I can't see it. I think, but you're right. It would be, but I see no evidence that the Trump administration be any less. I mean, it's a transactional. He's a transactional man, and anyway.
Anyway, my goal in the next few months is to get him 3 Nobel Peace Prizes.
If you can do it, I guess I'll be happy too. Although I'd be hard. I'd have to bite my tongue. But there's no evidence for any, the important treaties, NPT, non-proliferation, ABM, all the treaties. See any evidence, in your opinion, that we're going to begin to consider in this all-important question of nuclear weapons some treaties in the next administration? I don't think so.
We don't know. I don't think if you're making bets, I don't think you demand long odds on that. But on the other hand, the situation is so dangerous and so fraught that we better work hard at it. And unfortunately, sad for me, I voted for Biden in 2020, and I found the administration to be an utter failure on foreign policy, a disaster. And so I don't want to predict. I'm not partisan in this. I just think we had better do this for our survival, and I'll try to use whatever means I can in persuasion to try to get the right thing.
Well, unlike me, you have the ear of many of these people. So I'm going to ask you to see if you can get Trump a fourth Nobel Prize when it comes to nuclear weapons treaties. But
there you go. This is a great idea. Okay, progress.
Yeah, okay. And then last thing, your quote about Kissinger really got to me when it was like, it had to be an enemy, but worse to be a friend. I think of that when it comes to Trump's friends, namely, if I look at the history of people, and I know Elon Musk, and there are people who, it looks to me like being Trump's friend is the biggest danger to one's own personal future. I'm wondering what's going to happen there. Any prognostications?
I don't know. The first term was tremendously unstable, and it depended a lot on who happened to be where. And we have all these cynical, horrible memoirs of how this one manipulated Trump, how that one manipulated Trump, like John Bolton, who's another one not on my list of non-favorites. And maybe Trump has learned something. So let's see. Let's
hope so. From as someone would say who believed in God, from your mouth to God's ears.
Right.
But let me say, at least one of us has at least the ear of people, and I hope, therefore, that your sanity will help the world become a better place. And you certainly have helped me and helped the public by our conversation, which has gone on for now exactly twice as long as I think I'd planned, and probably twice as long as you had. But it's twice as wonderful.
But it's fun. It's twice. Yeah, I agree. Twice as pleasurable. So thank you very, very much. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's great. Thanks a lot, Jeffrey, and happy holidays to you too.
Happy New Year.
Okay, take care.